for joining us. My name is Madeline. I'm the leader of SilverLining's Global Youth Initiative. I'll be joined later after this brief presentation by Josh Mponsim, who is the founder of Green Africa Youth Organization. So our session, apologies I might be breezing through some seriously technical information because we have a small amount of time to work with, but we're going to be talking about engaging youth on disaster risk through research in solar climate interventions. Even with 1.5 degrees of warming, we're at risk of triggering irreversible tipping points. We are currently on a trajectory to hit some of these in the blue circle there. So that means increased disaster risk with extreme weather events and etc. etc. And even with aggressive emissions reductions and CDR, we're going to look at sun warming. And warming is the greatest stress on the Earth system, so it's the heat that's going to be crucial here. And yeah, so that again means increased disaster risk with extreme events, etc. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is climate intervention. That's basically based on the principle of aerosols. So first, it's helpful to explain what aerosols are. So aerosols are basically particulates or particles in the atmosphere that directly scatter sunlight, and they also affect clouds, usually making them more reflective, so bigger and brighter, and increasing the reflection of sunlight back into space. So that scattering of sunlight, that reflects heat back into space, but also the promotion of clouds, that also increases the heat reflection. So there's some naturally generated, for example, by volcanoes. They produce sulfur dioxide. It's an opposite to greenhouse gas. It reflects heat rather than traps it. And then also you can see in this picture here, this is basically smoke over southwestern United States. Some of that smoke is going to be reflecting heat back into space, but then also is going to be promoting cloud formation. So that's how more human-induced impacts basically promote the process of aerosols and the behavior of aerosols, I should say. And you can see here that aerosols have an overall cooling effect on the environment. So to date, aerosols, including human-produced, have offset a third of greenhouse gas warming. So that's a huge amount. And you can see that's the direct effect, so direct reflection, or the cloud albedo effect. And the cloud effect is clouds that have been produced by human processes. And this is an example of clouds generated by human processes. These are ship tracks. So the exhausts, those particulates coming out of the ship exhaust, is creating clouds over the Pacific Northwest coast of the United States. So that is increasing the reflection of sunlight back into space. So we're basically asking the question, can we harness those effects in a controlled way rather than in an uncontrolled manner, as humans are currently doing, to increase sunlight reflection and reduce climate warming, as warming is the greatest stress on the climate system. There's two kinds of solar climate interventions that our scientists believe are potentially feasible. One is stratospheric aerosol injection, so that's SAI. That's basically dispersing a very small amount of sulfur dioxide, the particles that come out of volcanoes, into the stratosphere, promoting the reflection process. The other one is marine cloud brightening, and that is essentially, the idea is to spray sea salt towards marine clouds to make them bigger and brighter. But questions remain over both. We need more research. So since its inception in August 2020, I've been leading SilverLining's Youth Initiative. Our main goals is to increase youth awareness of the science and research on these potential methods, improve youth participation in the development of research and policy, engage with youth in the most climate vulnerable areas, and also capacitate youth on making evidence-based decisions on solar climate interventions backed by science. That's our key goal. So with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Josh Mponsim, who's the founder of Green Africa Youth Organization. Josh has basically helped us to mature the initiative and help us make concrete steps in youth engagement, especially in the Global South. So that, just as an example, he helped us to organize a Earth Night event. So it's a screening of an episode that basically suppressed science episode. There's a link there if you'd like to watch it, on solar climate intervention in his home country of Ghana. He also helped us to organize one in Nepal. So SilverLining is funding these. And we have some upcoming, the clicker's being a bit slow, I'm sorry. We have some upcoming in Pakistan and Kenya. And they're basically, sessions to watch this episode, which explains the science, and have youth discuss them. So with that, I'd like to ask Josh a few questions. So Josh, in a nutshell, I want to know what exactly motivated you to become involved with what we're doing at the Global Youth Initiative in SilverLining.
Hello everyone, happy to be here. So I know we are tight on time, so I'll give very quick, sharp responses. First of all, the most important thing we need to realize is that mitigation is not working. We've been in negotiations since 1992. We've been talking about reducing global emissions, and every single year emissions are rising. We need to think around what are the possible options we have that will help us reduce emissions. So that is the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say around why I'm supporting the knowledge, awareness, and spread around this topic is that it is catching up. Some countries are piloting, some countries are researching, some countries are actively looking into it. Last year, comparing last year's session that were around this topic compared to this year, there are more conversations around climate intervention. My problem is how many young people from the global south have access to education, knowledge, and skills on this topic. And this is my call. So when I got in touch with SilverLining, I said, you are leading an incredible work on research around this topic. How can we work together to make sure that young people in the South can have equal access to knowledge, information, understanding on this topic? If not, we stand a very big risk. And that risk is that 5 years from now, the technology is known, the risks are reduced, we are ready to deploy, but there are no expertise in the global South. And we have to rely on the global North and their big universities, big technical institutions, to deliver the solution to us. So this was my main interest, saying that how do we make it fun and easy? I know it's technical, I know, spraying aerosols sounds very crazy and intense, but this is something that could help reduce emissions, and it's been worked on. How do we make it easy for young people to understand? How does a young student who wants to be a professional in this area get the chance to learn about this and be an expert in this topic? So that is my main motivation. I'm happy that we could do this, and also an open invitation to everyone. If you live in a country where your universities don't have courses like this, get in touch with Maddie, and she'll be able to let you know how you can learn more about this.
Thank you so much, Josh. You kind of touched on it, but from your experience, what has been the biggest hurdle in engaging young people on this?
I think that the youth community as a whole have had this very irrational experience that when the climate conversation started, we were made to believe that mitigation is the only thing we need to focus on. So what happened was that all campaigns, and I will challenge you, if you can find me a climate strike or protest where someone had a placard which said, adaptation now, send me that photo and I'll be very happy. All we did was fossil fuels, no fossil fuels, reduce emissions now. Everything was around carbon reduction. We were made to believe that is the only thing we need to do. And we left adaptation on the sidelines. We left resilience on the sidelines. And people have suffered for that. And this is the challenge I face with the youth movement, that we tend to follow a global narrative and we get lost in that global narrative. It doesn't make any sense from my perspective for a young kid in Ethiopia, for instance, or in Ghana to be campaigning saying that fly less. That person might never even get a chance to board a plane. So it doesn't make sense to say fly less. Meanwhile, there's drought, there's floods, and that adaptation and resilience is the most important thing. So I think that whole global narrative that puts some of these measures on the sideline to say that no, let's not focus on that. We can reduce emissions significantly by challenging industries, challenging countries. We've been challenging that since 1992. Now tell me a single year when emissions has run down. It's not happening. So we shouldn't go with that global narrative saying that We shouldn't look at other options. We can reduce emissions by simply planting trees. Yes, we can. But will it be able to meet the scale of the impact that is ahead of us? No. So we need to invest in research, we need to invest in other options, and more importantly, young people need to realize that whatever negotiations are going on here is their life on the lifeline. It's their life that is being negotiated on. So either you feed into a global narrative or you look at the next few years and understand that even if we hit 1.5 degrees, which is, hopefully we can do that, but most likely we might not, given how commitments have been made. If you do not meet 1.5 degrees, the consequences are great. Even if you meet 1.5 degrees, the consequences are unbearable. So emission reduction is an essence. We cannot miss that. Adaptation and resilience is a must. Loss and damage is a must. And we need to advocate for them in their right proportions and not follow one narrative where we all say loss and damage and that is it. Or we say mitigation and that it is. We need a different mix of solutions, advocacy, and policies that will let us really create the life that we want to have ahead of us.
Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, well deserved. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. We're inspired, we're grateful, and thank you for joining us.
No one's thinking about how to balance between asking and for less and damage and other things. I want you to highlight how, if we just focus on lose and damage, will affect the fund of adaptation than the fund of other things, and how this can go back to the resilience.
I think the reason why a lot of focus have moved to loss and damage is because someone caused the problem and they need to be responsible for it. And those who cause the problem are obviously much richer than those who are facing the problem. They need to pay up. And I think that is a great advocacy. In paying up, what we've not figured out yet is how will that payment look like? If it's reparations, who is it going to? And how do you channel that money? Currently, if you look at adaptation finance, even though adaptation and resilience have not gotten a lot of the money, there is still a lot of accessibility inequality, where those who have the best proposals are the ones receiving funding, not those who actually need the money to build resilience. And that is a big problem. So while we are pushing for loss and damage, we're pushing for finance for that, I think we need to start thinking around when the money is given. So if today, the US, EU says, okay, we're going to give 100 billion for loss and damage, what do you do with that money? And how do you actually distribute it? What is the mechanism for that? Because up until now, GCF, Adaptation Fund, all the other funds that exist, it is not based on rights. It's based on who have the best pitch forward and who has the best capability to put the best proposal forward. So that is not great. Now the second part is that at the end of the day, mitigation is the best adaptation. If we didn't pollute, we wouldn't even have to talk about adaptation and resilience. We wouldn't have to talk about loss and damage. We have polluted so much that reducing emission is not as fast enough as we can make it. So we need to think about adaptation, resilience, loss and damage. So while we work on adaptation, resilience, loss and damage, we still need to go back to how do we reduce emissions drastically within the next few years. So the finance is needed. We need to build resilience, but I think that in doing that, we shouldn't forget that our vision on reducing emissions drastically. And in doing that, we don't have a good track record, right? I mean, we've not had a single period where emission has been going down just by the will of government and industry. Yeah.
I'm Hayley from Care International, Gender and Climate Adaptation Advisor. So, quick question, Joshua. So, if there were three tips you could give young people across Africa who are keen to take part in adaptation action, so this could be advocacy in their countries or supporting communities to develop adaptation plans, for instance, like adaptation initiatives, what would those three tips be?
I will use my own life as an example. So when I wanted to work on adaptation, the first thing I did was read about it from all potential sources. Learn about it, get to know about it. The second thing that I think is most important is identify a policy framework around this, either through your national government or through the UNFCCC. I had a chance in 2018 to go for my first adaptation committee meeting in Bonn, and that was insightful, great opportunity. So, and you can do this at the national level, at the regional level. So that is another thing, the policy framework. Then the third thing I would say is that understand your risk. That is the most essential part. If you do not understand the risk, you don't even know what you're adapting to. So is your risk food insecurity? Is your risk flooding? Is your risk drought? Is it urban heat waves?
Understanding that risk helps you to really think around how can I adapt, how fast can that be, but also what are the measures that can really reduce this risk significantly. And I think in doing that, that is how I realized that, okay, no matter what, if we do not reduce emissions drastically, we cannot just adapt, because once you adapt to one thing, another thing emerges. So you have to constantly trying to keep up until emissions are reduced drastically.
The fact that you're actually informing the young at a young age regarding the science, the needs, what they can do, that's really key. I'm just interested to know whether government on a governmental level is involved in your initiative, because they hold the information, right?
So when it comes to climate intervention, not every government have the resources and capacity. So that is the first thing. Not every university have the resource and capacity. So governments are trying to keep up, but I think that we should acknowledge that big universities like AGU, like the US universities have the resources to do this, not in the global south. So we need to first of all advocate for our government to form partnerships, relationship, exchange programs that allow our students in the south to be able to go learn about these things, and eventually set up institutions in the global south that can do some of this research and produce the knowledge that is needed. At the end of the day, I mean, this is needed because countries like mine and like yours are going to flood. So why not really empower those countries to have the knowledge and skills and the understanding for interventions like this? Thank you so much for sparing us the time.